Well, hello everyone and welcome back to my studio. In today's lesson, we're going to be painting this painting right here using the Catalyst Wedge tool and some acrylic paint. And we're going to be mixing it up and having fun and walking through how to paint birch trees with the Catalyst Wedge and kind of a simple step. It's going to be lots of fun. Simple steps on how to start and finish and mix colors. And so stick around, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. It really helps my channel to grow. And by the way, thanks to all of you who have subscribed. I'm on my way to my goal this year of reaching 10K followers, and so far I'm up to 8,000 followers. So thank you so much for all of you who have been supporting me in this painting journey. So I look forward to teaching you, so stick around for this fun video. Happy painting. Okay, so to start off, when I'm going to paint something like this with the birch, I want to first get in, just to keep it simple, I'm going to get in some of the grays and blues that are in the backdrop. So I've got out my paints here. I'm just going to get a little bit of, just going to spray my canvas quickly with some water, just to kind of get it so that the paint can glide on a little smoother. And I'm using this 2-inch paddle brush here, and I'm going to get a little bit of white, and I want to look at it. Starts off with sort of a nice kind of light grayish sky. You can see that there's some sort of mountains. So I'm using this Liquitex Basics blue gray, and I want to get that first little bit in there. This will just make it a lot simpler later when putting on all the trees and everything, to have some of that blue in there, that bluey gray. So then the next thing I'm going to do, I'll add a little more paint, and I see that behind there you can just see some beautiful shades of blue, and there's some beautiful greeny turquoise. So I'm going to get this light blue color, and I want to mix some viridian in there, and I'm going to just put in some of those greens that I see over on that far side there, some really beautiful greens, and kind of drag that in. And then there's some kind of bluey gray mountains in there, so I'm going to add some of that blue gray, and I want to gray it down. I'll use a little burnt sienna in there. Now I've got a nice bluey gray color, and I want to put that in, especially as we get down into the trees. The kind of the holes through the trees you'll see get a lot darker. And because we have so much yellow in there, you can sort of think about, because we're not making a photograph, we're making a painting, you know, you can think about different tones of, you know, purples and different things we'll add later on. So stick around and watch this video so you can see how we get these birch trees to look even more beautiful than they already do in the photo. So I'll just kind of lighten that up. And I see it gets a little lighter, so just adding some white into that mix. I'll get a little white, just sort of get in some of that. And just blend it around. And I'm going to get a little more white, and just sort of blend that together. So this will give us a head start when we go to get the rest of the trees in there. I'm going to add a little bit of this quinacridone magenta and a little bit of that cobalt blue. And I want to get some of those real deep different, some different hues of kind of a purpley gray in there too. So I'm going to mix in a little bit so that in the foreground some of those warm purples will kind of show up here and there. Sort of like starting from an abstract and moving to sort of an impressionistic. And I think with all the yellows and everything later, that'll really shine through those bits of grayish purple in there. And I'm not much of a YouTuber painter, people that can just dust in all these different backgrounds with their mop brush. And then I'm more of a impressionistic painter, but this is my attempt at doing your nice blended background. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to start on using the catalyst wedge to really get the leaves and the trees on there. So stick around and I'll be right back. Alrighty, now we've got the background dry and that's taken care of. We just need to start mapping out our painting. So you can use, you could start by putting in where you want to see these birch and making sure you get the sizing right. And then you can go and start adding some of the other trees. Or some people add all the background trees and then draw the birch straight on top. I tend to like to, put in the birch first so I can kind of see where everything's going. So I'll just use I'm going to use a little bit of red and burnt sienna just to sort of map out where everything's going. So I'm going to look at the angle. I really like that angle, so I want to make sure I get that coming in there. And you just never know until you get something on your canvas how it's going to work. So you just sort of start somewhere and don't be scared to do it. Just try it, and I'm using a 14 by 14 canvas that I got from Michael's, and it's one of the value pack canvas, so it's not like I'm investing a whole lot. It's just fun painting, and it's good to do landscapes once in a while. And because fall is coming, I thought, what a good idea to paint some kind of autumn catalyst wedge landscape with the catalyst wedge. I've never really done a landscape with it before. So for the other trees, I'm going to mix a little cobalt and burnt sienna to get them in a little darker. All these little black ones, or they're dark brown, but I'm just going to put some of those in. You can darken it, I added a little viridian, and later I'll really darken them in where I want to see them darker, but for now I'm just going to draw some of these branches here and there because you keep some and you'll get rid of some, but it helps to get some of this going in the beginning. And I'm just going to get a few of those really pretty branches in there. I love painting trees. It's one of my favorite is to paint. Aside from painting flowers and birds, I really do love painting trees. I'll put in a few random branches here and there to have, because it really helps later to have these kind of there, because you can get rid of some of them or paint around them, but it really is a great part of the painting. Sort of this empty part with the tree. You can always add them later. Everyone paints differently. You know, some people paint them all on at the end, but I choose to paint a little differently than what you see on YouTube. And I like the more painterly effect of cutting out around things versus just plastering all the leaves and everything on top. I think it takes more work, and people will say, why did you do it like that? It was so much harder. But once your eye gets used to looking at, you know, different landscape art in galleries and whatnot, nobody paints just, you know, a bunch of trees on top. This is as close to painting that way as I get, you know, by painting the background. It just keeps it a lot simpler for everyone who's just starting out. So I'm gonna just get rid of this big brush for a sec. It's taking up my water. And I gotta get my paper towels quickly. So now I've got sort of my birch. I've got a bunch of these little black branches in there. I can start to sort of pattern out where I'm going to put the all the foliage. So I'm going to take some of this yellow oxide, and I'm going to sort of map out the overall kind of layers where they're going, and also it helps me to see the birch trees from the other trees and everything. So kind of goes down and then over, and then there's this whole area up here where there's some beautiful bunch of different shades of orange, and kind of keep going over here. And just using this, it's not transparent yellow oxide, this is just Blick Artist Acrylic yellow oxide, so it's not transparent, but I figure it's sort of almost like a yellow ochre, so it'll kind of be a good one to get to mark out where everything's going here. So there's a bit of yellow kind of coming down here, and this big birch, there's some more yellow there. And then some darker layers in there. So you don't want to get it, you know, you don't have to do it all, but I'm just sort of marking everything out so I know kind of the gist of where things are going. And okay, so then I'm going to get my my spatula tool here, and I'm going to start applying some of this paint. And I've never done a birch tree with this before, so wish me luck. I'm going to mix a little gray in with the white to start, and going to just kind of start going with the flow, and I'll just block in one of the birch. It's a real bravery test doing this, but I figure if I can do it, you can do it. And we'll all keep learning this thing together. I'll make it through the year. I told myself this is the year I'm going to just do it no matter how crazy it looks. It's so much fun. Playing with this thing is really fun. So I'm just using some liquitex basics for this, and I'll put all the links in the description. And if I forget, just remind me. So I'm just blocking that in. And of course up here it's gonna kind of, the values between this white and that real bright background are a little bit they get closer. So I think the sky is actually brighter than the tree. If I squint down, those sky holes are brighter. So I'll remember to keep this a little darker, and I'll go back in and add a little bit to the sky that's a little bit brighter. So I'm going to remember that. And I won't try to make these any lighter. So I'm just using Liquitex Blue Gray and some of the Liquitex Basics white. And you know, for the birch, while I got the paint wet, I could, you know, use some of that brown and kind of drag it in to the paint, and it creates those sort of birch-like. So that was just the mix I made for that brown. I'm just gonna, I'll mix up some of that on the side so I can add some of those marks. Kind of just learning as I go here how to do this. So I'm just gonna add some viridian, transparent brown oxide, and cobalt, and that'll create some nice kind of marks that look kind of like that birch. Paper, whatever you call it, that peels off. Could actually get some of that on first and try it this way on this one. And definitely gonna need more white for this this painting here. Just kind of mixing that gray tone. So now I'm doing it with the color underneath and pulling it through, and you can see it kind of creates the same kind of birch-like marks there. There we go. And you can use the edge of your catalyst to make some interesting marks in the tree as well. Just using that corner, I'm sort of pulling away, but so far, not too bad. So I'm just gonna, this one's quite a bit darker because they're kind of going back into the woods a bit, so I could take a little bit of that green and brown and blue mixture and sort of add a little more to gray it down a bit more so it's a little darker. The thing is just to remember not to make them straight up and down. I know I see a lot of professional painters that paint birch trees all night and day, and they're like straight lines on the canvas, and it kind of, you just don't see trees in real life that are that straight. So it's a little hard to get the edge of my canvas here, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to add more of that to there, kind of darken it a little more. And there's this one over here. And there's a bit of a kind of a baby birch tree kind of going off to the side here. I'm going to add that just to keep it more interesting. And there's one showing up just in the background, so I mixed up a little more white with that ultramarine blue, viridian green, and transparent brown oxide to make it a little darker. I'm just going to pop that one in there. And you can use a bit of that darker greeny gray color just to kind of add some shadow to some of these. There we go, just sort of create a little bit of a variety as well in the white. So using that color, I can just sort of give them a little shape here and there, and use the edge of my wedge, to sort of blend that in there. So I think that's so far so good. Now the next step is going to get funner because we'll start to dab in different colors. So I'm going to go and clean off this palette knife and my palette paper, and I'll have it all ready with yellow next. Okay, so I've got this other Catalyst Princeton tool, and it's this flat rubber one, and it's called, what is it called? Is there any name to this? It's just called a Mini 01. So first of all, I want to get some of these darker colors in there. So I might even mix a little burnt sienna as well with some of that cad yellow, just to get some real nice variety in some of the warmer yellows. So I'm just mixing some of that so you get get to see there's the yellow oxide, and then I mix some of this, and I could even warm it up a little. So then I'm going to start by blotching that around because I want to get that texture and I want to be able to build on it. So I'm just going to go and get that in there. And I'm going to go back to my Catalyst wedge tool because I kind of like that round edge that it has on it, and it makes some nice rounded marks. So with the details, I'll go back to that. I like to leave little sky holes there for that blue to show. But I'm just sort of getting this next layer in there so it can really build. And I decided to paint fall because I'm kind of burnt out from the summer here in Arizona. It's been really, I know it's not as hot as some summers, but this feels like a real hot summer so far. So I decided I'm gonna at least skip over some of it by painting some fall paintings today. So I'm mixed in a little bit of viridian into this batch here to kind of darken it some more. But you just want to, it's just sort of like you're just creating another layer, you know what I mean? And making sure to leave some of those blues and everything in there. At first it feels uncomfortable because you don't have like a good sense of what's happening. You know, you have to kind of paint these. I used to paint these all the time, and I don't paint them as often now, but I really enjoy painting them. But one of the things you just learn is to kind of get through these awkward stages where it looks like your painting is just not really looking the way you would want it to. And then eventually you get to the fun stages, and that's like kind of like that. There's the 80-20 principle, but I feel like sometimes paintings it's more like 90-10. 90% of it you think this thing is going straight to the you know, straight to the curb, but or you can paint over it or something if you want, but then at the end you're like, oh wow, glad I kept working on it. And so let me know in the comments if you how you feel about that, how your paintings seem to go for you. I feel like it's sort of sometimes it's not till the very end that I start to really enjoy it. Okay, these are more delicate, these yellows up here, and that's going to be more where that light is. So I'm going to add a little gray, kind of mix up something that looks more like the background. I'm going to mix some viridian and that blue-gray and some of that burnt sienna, and get some of these leaves that are in the background there. Just sort of put some of that in there for now as a space holder for some of these darker, kind of more, they're just kind of more in the background, if you know what I mean. And some of that kind of comes over here. Just going to mix up a little more of that viridian and that yellow oxide color, so I get some kind of green tones in there. I'm going to add a little white to them so they're kind of a little more muted. Some of that kind of comes through here. Some of that kind of more green tone. And with a little bit of white in there, it kind of, this color will kind of be like a nice neutral, kind of to balance all the color. You need to mix up some, you know, some neutral always with your bright colors to really make them pop. If it's all just bright, then it gets kind of boring, so you kind of got to think about some different tones and that are part of the same kind of family but a little bit different. So there's a really nice abstract element in this, you know, in this lesson when you're using this catalyst tool. You really have to kind of keep it abstract. I really like the way that purple area is kind of showing up there. And I'm just going to dab some of those shapes there, just using my edge of this so you can see it's kind of creating some of that. Scoop some of that up and then dab some of that in there. I really like that color. And so that's a good second layer. Okay, so now I'm going to go to using my catalyst wedge, and I'm going to get some of this orange, a little bit of that burnt sienna, and I'll dull it down a little more with that yellow oxide so it's not so fluorescent. So I'm going to just kind of glob some of that on here, and now I can start, you know, I'm using the corner of the catalyst wedge because it really makes a good mark, and I'm going to look at the pattern, kind of where that more orangey color goes, and I can always, you know, make it brighter in certain areas. But I'm trying to, it's my attempt at making some kind of leafy shapes using that edge of that brush. kind of that one tree kind of goes down. Might even, I'm going to add a little bit of that red that I had out there. That was just some primary red by Liquitex Basics to get some, just a little more of that warmer color in there too. And we'll put in some more red and put in a few real red leaves, which I do see coming through. And I'll just sort of bring some of that down and off the canvas there. And now I'm going to get more of that yellow and put some of that cad yellow in there. And I'm going to start building up to these little brighter leaves that are kind of coming down this side. We won't do the brightest bright yet. We'll sort of kind of block in some of that yellow area wherever there's some up here with some really pretty kind of yellow coming in there. And then there's this one. Get more yellow in there. Kind of some of it. Now you can have fun with crossing over in front of some of those trees that are in the background there. All right, and just keep going. And I can start adding some of that more kind of pure yellow. And I try to remember to put some small marks really with that bright yellow, just to have almost like the leaves kind of are up here and they're kind of just glistening in the sun. So I'm using my palette knife like it's kind of like I'm dabbing the paint as it comes onto the canvas here. I'm just dabbing it and it's making these random leafy marks, which is nice. Adds that kind of almost like a glitter. In the background there. I'm really just kind of dabbing it on there. It's really, it's a really fun feeling when you can kind of just dab the leaves on like this. So that's kind of why we set it up in the beginning. It takes a little bit of time, but once you get it going, you really got you can really get this paint on there pretty quick with this tool. That's for sure. And then I'm going to go back and make up a little bit more of that green and transparent yellow. Add some of that burnt sienna in there. And I can go back and add some thicker versions of those kind of greeny colors that are all mixed in, greeny yellow. Maybe add a little orange in there. Kind of just trying to dull it down so it's more neutral. It's like a kind of an army green. So now I can go in and just sort of add some texture to those other kind of where I had the back, all the greens and stuff coming through. I can go in and add some nice thicker versions of those greens. And down in here it gets more of that greeny color in there. And add a little more of that yellow oxide and have some that's a little more yellow. Okay, so I think that's a good start on all that. And I want to let that sit for a sec, and then I'm going to go back to my birch trees. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go and sort of get a little more white and sort of some of that, I'm going to get some of that light blue color that I have out there that it's just called, I think it's just called light blue. It's Light Blue Permanent by Liquitex Basics is what I got. And I've got that blue, gray, and white still on my palette here. And I'm going to go with this mini catalyst tool and just sort of kind of lighten some of those trees up a little bit, just to kind of make them pop a bit. I'm just going to go and add a bit more of that paint to it. And also I'm going to go and add some of the sky. I kind of want to put in some of those lighter notes in there. Got to sort of cut into the sky, but I have so much, so much of that got lost because I added too much maybe of the tree, but I think I'll just sort of cut in some of it. See how that works. Just mix a little more of that light blue and white in there. And for now, I'll let that set because I wanted to get that in there, and earlier it just sort of kind of got lost. And okay, now I'm going to go back to my birch trees. I will, while that's wet, maybe just kind of cut in some of those branches while it's nice, and because it's such thick paint. Just going to use the edge of this with some black, and then I'm going to cut in some of those branches while that's kind of wet still. There. It'll all make sense eventually. Okay, back to the birch. I got sidetracked there. Sidetracked into the sky. And okay, so I'm just going to keep adding a little bit more paint here and there to those just to get them really stand out. They kind of look more defined when you kind of go back and add the next layer. You just want to leave some space between strokes so that you get kind of that paper birch look. Now on these ones that are a little in the dark, I'm going to add a little bit of that quinacridone magenta and some cobalt blue just to sort of give them a little bit of a purple tone. Kind of mix in, make sort of a purpley color, and then I'll add some of that white in there for the shadow. And if you want to dull the purple down, just take a little bit of that yellow oxide and you'll get kind of a more neutral purple. So there you go. Now it's kind of more balanced. I want to add that purple in there just to really offset that, all those yellows. I feel like that'll look kind of nice to have some of that purple in there. You could even put a little bit of that in these ones in the front here. Just livens them up to have some of that purple in there. And I like to even put a few of those little branches that are in the background coming off the birch. You could use some of that purple just to throw in some random sort of branches. It just really is starting to make sense a little more now, at least to me. Okay, so I'm just gonna can get a little bit lighter there. Just sort of soften up some of those purples using a little bit of a lighter mix too. And okay, so now I'm going to start having, you can start adding some of the details. So you could use your, if you feel like using your paintbrush, you can, but I'm going to just use I think I'll just use the edge of this. I also have this one that I've been using in the videos, so if you bought one of these, you can use that. Whoopsies, dropped. Drop that. Okay, so now we can start adding some of the details, and I could use this little mini brush, or you know, we could use the edge of this brush here to just put in some of those branches. And I'm just going to use some black, and let me just get my palette here. So I could use this catalyst tool, but you got to make sure you get it on the edge of that, right on the edge, and then you want to go and sort of put in some of those trees. So you could just use the edge of your catalyst tool, and then you could use it to just pop in some real small marks there for the little finer branches. And then maybe for some of the shorter ones, I'll go to the mini brush, and because I can control the length of them a little better, that was kind of making it so I had to do a lot larger scale branch. But I'm gonna go in there and put some of those back in. And you notice I'm not carrying the lines all the way through. I don't want that, because then it'll look just so drawn on it'll look kind of annoying. So I'm going to put some of them just sort of in there. You can always let them dry and then put the yellows back on. But I'm just going to get in some of those nice marks that we originally drew on, and then I painted right over them. So you kind of, you win some, you lose some. But I like the way that looks, and you could always go and put in a few little bit, you know, some of these eyes in the birch tree, just work in some of that black to darken some of those lines. And remember to keep that shape, so don't just go and put them straight across. You know, you want to kind of keep the shape a little. And just take a step back and look at it every once in a while and see where you need to put some more. Okay, so now I've got those marks on there. I kind of take a step back and look at where some you kind of want them to land on ground somewhere. You don't want them all floating. And then sort of going there you go. So once you get them on, you can take a look and say, okay, I think I'm going to do more, or I'm going to do less of those. And then you sort of can gauge it from there. Now I'm going to go and just going to get my paintbrush, because this is going to be a little harder to do if I don't. And I'm going to mix up some more of that light blue and viridian. I forgot what color it was I used, and some of that blue-gray color. And I'm going to just sort of cut back out some of the background in there using that color that I had originally painted underneath. So I want to go in and just sort of look at where do I want to kind of maybe enlarge in some of those sky holes a bit, and just sort of kind of rejig it a bit so I get more, maybe a little more sky coming back in. And some of it I'll mix a little more of that lighter color I've got out there, and poke in some more of that sky. And it also adds to the whole beauty of it that it's not perfect. It has a real, now it's getting another next level kind of abstract feel to it up close when you see this. All the different textures and brush strokes and everything are starting to really become really impressionistic with this next kind of step. So when you get a little bit of the tree, you don't want your blue to start turning into mud. So you just make sure to clean your brush, and you may have to start wiping it in between because there's so much yellow. So I just have to grab, there's some more paper towel here, and because otherwise it'll start to get too mucky. So I'm being very impressionistic here how I add this. It's really just adding these kind of sky holes is a bit of a bravery test in itself. And you start to form a new pattern on top of the old pattern. So it's like, it's a very kind of fun thing to do. All right, so I feel pretty good about that. The one area I want to kind of clean up is the real lightest light area here that got me going down this whole road. And I want to kind of clean up that. That area. And kind of cross over. I'll mix some of that other, kind of blend it so that it goes from that light to dark. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the trees because we want to finish off strong. I want to add some, I'm just going to get rid of this. Palette is pretty bad. I think I'll just, well, maybe I'll just scrape this, make kind of a patch so I don't waste it of space there. And I'll go to my little spatula and I'm going to get some really bright yellow, so, and kind of pale. So I'm adding white to that cad yellow. So I'm getting a real pale, and I can neutralize it a little by adding some of that oxide yellow. So it's going to be a bright, for these kind of ones up here, I want to add a few of these real bright little areas where the leaves are kind of a little bit on the brighter side. Coming down on this side of the painting is this maple that has these real bright yellows. So I'm taking a step back and I'm just making sure I like that. And you can kind of cross over this tree here. And then over here, there's some lighter leaves that are a little more, they're not as bright, but they're light. So I'm going to add more of that yellow oxide to that mix, and we'll kind of add some of those. Brighter, lighter leaves in there. Okay, before I get carried away and start to make the whole thing look flat, I think that does it. I tried really hard to create a neutral, not like there's a lot of color, but there's a lot of neutrals in there, and so I really am happy with this. And we'll do more landscapes with the spatula because I really think I could learn a lot about how to do them, and it was a lot of fun. So I hope you like this, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share it with a friend. And if you have any questions, please don't forget to leave them in the comments for me.